Hi everyone, I'm Zuzu, and today we're going to talk about books. I have got a big pile of books in front of me. They're all from my local library, which if you have a local library and you're not using it, you want to get on that. Libraries are magic. You can just go in there and they let you walk out with books for free, as many as you want. It's incredible. Anyway, these are all my library books for the week. So I thought I'd whiz through these books. This is my library haul for the week. They're just about to go back to the library so I can get the next batch. And I thought I would talk you through my favourites, what I liked, what I didn't like. And actually this pile has several that have been some of my favourite reads of the year so far. So it's a really juicy one. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to kick things off with The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And this, I absolutely fucking loved this book. It was wonderful. It's about a girl in the 18th century, I think it's 1714, and she basically makes a deal with an old god in the forest to escape from an arranged marriage. On her wedding day, and she wishes for more time, and she wishes to never belong to anybody. And of course, this is granted to her. She is given immortality, and the caveat is that no one will ever remember her. So she can't say her real name, she can't write anything down. If she tells anybody the story of what happened to her, they don't hear her. She'll have these incredible connections with people, and then the following day they don't know who she is. It's incredibly lonely and incredibly difficult, but incredibly free. Like, she feels incredibly liberated by this. And every year the god comes to her and says, like, will you surrender? Will you yield your soul to me? Are you ready for this to be over? And she'll remember seeing the sunrise over Paris, or seeing the opera, or a piece of art that she was particularly moved by, or dancing or music or something incredible. She'll remember all the places she hasn't yet been, and she'll say no. And I think there's also some defiance in her as well. It's like, you tricked me and I'm not going to let you win, which sort of comes to a glorious conclusion at the end. And partway through, she meets somebody who does remember her. I really liked the way it was done, in that it wasn't this epic, towering love story. Like, the thing that she most wants is to be remembered, which is wonderful, and this is what this man can give her. But it's not like he just happens to be her soulmate and the most perfect person for her ever, and they have this incredible relationship. They do have a wonderful relationship, but there are complications, and she loves him in a way, but he's not like the love of her life or anything. And I think the fact that the author manages to maintain Addie's independence the whole way through, she's never at the mercy of a man. And she even the old god who comes to her in the form of a man, and they even have a love affair for a while. She never surrenders herself. She never gives up her agency. She takes what she has been given and she owns it, She accepts the consequences for her choice and her desire. Even though she was tricked, she never makes it into a self-pity story. And she never makes her life about anybody else. It's about hers, and she lives it for herself. So, yeah, highly, highly recommend this one. It was a real treat. Really, really enjoyed it. Okay, moving on. This one was recommended by a booktuber I follow, and I can't remember who it was. It's called That's Not My Name. I'm sorry, I'm just getting over a cold at the moment, so my voice is a bit like, so I apologise if you can hear that. It's called That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. And it's like a murder mystery book, and I didn't realise it's actually a YA book. And I read it the whole way through, and it was fine. It was good. So I enjoyed it. I can't remember a great deal about it, but it bowled along merrily, and a good time was had by all. It's about a girl that goes missing and her boyfriend, who everybody thinks killed her, and he goes on a mission to try and find her and figure out what happened to her and investigate where the police gave up. And it was fine. I love a good murder mystery, and it's not particularly because they're the best literature in the world. I find them incredibly comforting. And it's just lovely escapism, I love a good murder. This next one is the only non-fiction on this pile. It's The Conversations, Walter Murch and the Art of Editing Film. Walter Murch or Murch, I don't know how you pronounce it. He's a famous movie editor. Honestly, I had never heard of him, but he edited Apocalypse Now and The English Patient. Apocalypse Now, I have not seen all the way through, but the clips that I have seen, the editing is one of the things that I'm like, fuck, that's clever. I like that. There's one scene in Apocalypse Now where there's a guy in a hotel room talking about his memories of the war, and there's a shot of the ceiling fan going round, and it's cut with the sound of helicopter blades, and then it sort of merges into a helicopter, and it's just really, really beautifully done. It's really clever. It's just really smooth and lovely. And as I'm doing more YouTube lately, and I'm really getting into sort of the arts of filmmaking and what makes a good video, which I feel like every YouTube video is essentially like a little short film. Some are more elaborate than others, but you're always looking for ways to keep people engaged and to keep the momentum going. I wanted to see if this gave any insight. And this was actually the only one on the pile that I didn't finish, because the interview style was all a bit self-congratulatory, and that I'm a smart man and you're a smart man and all our friends are smart men, and it was all very kind of, there's a lot of willies being whopped around, you know, and that always just turns me off cold. There was probably some good editing insight, why certain decisions were made and what have you, but honestly I couldn't get through all of the ego and the self-congratulatoriness to get into that. So there's another book by Walter Murch called In the Blink of an Eye, I think, which is purely his sort of guide to editing, how he edits and the things that are important to him. But I think that's the one that I actually want to read. Okay, next up, we have one that I just finished this morning, which is The Lion Women of Tehran by Marjan Kamali, which is, I really like this one as well. This is about two women in Iran, born in the 50s, so it's going through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, when Iran was a lot more progressive, certainly in terms of their attitude to women. I don't know what they were like in other respects, but probably not that great. But certainly in their attitudes to women, they were a lot more open-minded. Like, hijab wasn't mandatory, they could get an education, they were allowed to go places unaccompanied, you know. And then the fall of the Shah, who everybody kind of hated, like everybody wanted a revolution, which is great. And then the Ayatollah, who came in and took over power from the Shah, then enforced these really, really strict religious laws. So women were basically just downgraded instantly, particularly when it came to wearing hijab and being covered. Like, if you could see a single strand of hair, you could be beaten and whipped, imprisoned. And this is the story of two childhood friends and a woman who leaves Iran and just before this sort of kicks off and goes to live in America, and her best friend who stays and becomes a freedom fighter basically and is imprisoned on multiple occasions and fights her entire life. It was really moving, and I think Iran is just an absolutely fascinating country, and I think there are a lot of, unfortunately, interesting parallels between what's happening particularly in the US and certainly in the UK to a slightly lesser degree at the moment, with certain rights, particularly for women and marginalised people, being rolled back, and just the horror of seeing how these things that we think are inalienable, that they are just a part of how we operate as a culture and as a society, to see how easily those can be stripped away. And even now Iran hasn't recovered from what happened in the 80s. So the subject matter was fascinating. The writing, I found it a little stiff, and I think that's probably a stylistic choice because it's mostly told from the point of view of the woman who escaped to America, who is quite stiff. She's very concerned with how other people think of her, and she's not the most likeable character. Her friend, who we see less of, is actually a far more interesting, likeable, active character. But the point of view that we get through most of the book is this sort of more passive, stiff, more conformist character. So I think the writing style was sort of illustrated that quite well. But it did kind of trip me up. Like, it took me a little bit to get into it, but the story's great. So yeah, not my favourite one of this pile, but I did really enjoy it. And then we have another comfort read, which is Marian Keyes' My Favourite Mistake. I don't know, I wasn't feeling particularly inspired. Last month was super social and outy and a lot of people going on, and I've been a bit poorly, so I just wanted something that I could sort of snuggle up with, revisit characters that I already know, which is one of my favourite things to do. Like, sometimes meeting new people, even between the pages of a book, is a bit much. So I'm always glad when authors kind of revisit characters in multiple different books. And this is another Walsh family book from Marian Keyes. And yeah, this one's great. It was a lovely, frothy, light-hearted book about trauma and depression. which is always fun. Marian Keyes has a wonderful light touch with things like that. She's one of my favourite comfort authors. Next up, we have another book of short stories. Now, if you watched my last book video, you know that I feel some kind of way about short stories. Like, when they're good, they're very, very good. But most of the time they're not. I like a story that has a beginning, a middle and an end. Like, I'm quite rigid in what I like. When it comes to short stories, I don't really enjoy vignette style short stories. I want you to tell me a fucking story. Don't just like create an atmosphere. That's not good enough. And this one is Her Body and Other Parties, which again I have seen recommended all over the place by Carmen Machado. And this one I actually enjoyed. It didn't knock my socks off, but I did thoroughly enjoy it, and I actually read all of them all the way through, and I really enjoyed all of them. They have a sort of like surreal edge, and they're about women's bodies, violence against women. Obviously, since putting together Things Men Have Said to Me Instead of Hello last year, this is a topic that I keep coming back to over and over again. If you've seen any of my like art videos recently, you'll know that the whole idea of the experience of having a body is something that I'm deeply engaged with as an idea at the moment, and I think my next body of work, no pun intended, will come from that place. So this one, it was interesting. It was quite dark, quite surreal. They had some horror elements. There was some queer stuff going on. It was quite sexy at times. There was like weirdly funny and surreal. There's one story in here which is just 272 episode ideas for Law and Order. Which kind of follows this whole body snatching narrative and hungry ghosts, and it's just mental and like weird and funny and almost like a sort of prose poem. Like, it's the sort of thing that you couldn't do for an entire novel. It would just get tedious. But to do it as a way of telling a story in this format, I thought it was really clever and it really worked well. There was a story about women disappearing and becoming invisible and being sewn into the fabric of prom dresses and things. Story of a woman whose head is only held on by a ribbon, and her husband unties the ribbon. Yeah, really good. Looking back over it and remembering it, I'm like, oh shit, yeah, no, I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed this one a lot. For short stories, I liked it. Okay, we're nearing the end. Next, another whodunit murder mystery. This one's The Note by Alafair Burke, who is an author that I pick up quite frequently. Again, not the best book I've ever read in my entire life, but I thoroughly enjoyed the couple of hours that I spent in that particular world. They bowl along and they take you out of yourself for a couple of hours, and I don't really have anything to say about it other than, if you like murder mysteries, Alafair Burke's a decent author. It's interesting because I have a high tolerance for trash, but it's not even that. It's like, sometimes I just want to switch my brain off, and books like that, like a solid 3-star book, murder mystery, nothing too taxing, you kind of know what's going to happen. Like, I'm not looking for anything that's too good. I don't want my brain to be excited. I just want it to have a nice predictable story wash over it so it can calm down. And that's what murder mysteries do for me. And I don't care if they're predictable. In fact, I would rather they were predictable. I'd rather they were a bit formulaic. I don't want to be challenged. I don't necessarily want the characters to be relatable. I'm very happy for them to be incredibly heteronormative, to be just really bland and boring and normal. And it's like just pressing an off switch in my brain. So when I go for like comfort reads, comfort murder, like that's exactly what I'm looking for. If it's a really, really great murder mystery, it doesn't do the same thing for me. I like good books, obviously, but there's a particular thing that these do for me, which nothing else does. And then the last book that I read this week is Ruth Ozeki's The Book of Form and Emptiness. I actually wrote about this one in my newsletter. If you don't get my newsletter, it comes out every week, every other week, depending on what else is going on in my life. And I always talk about what I'm reading and talk about films and what I'm working on, what I'm thinking about, and what's going on in the House of Cats. And it's a great read. And if you're not already signed up, you really should do that. Link is in the description. But this one I spoke about in my newsletter because it's one of the most beautiful, interesting and compassionate treatises, I suppose, on mental health that I've read for a really, really long time. It's about a 13-year-old boy whose father dies. His father dies like in the very first chapter, and his mother is grieving and develops sort of hoarding tendencies. And the protagonist is this 13-year-old boy who hears voices. He hears the voices of the inanimate objects around him, and he's sort of plagued by them until he goes to a psych ward for children, and he meets a girl there who calls herself the Alafair, and she's an artist, and she leaves these little notes like a sort of scavenger hunt in the library. Again, it's all centered around a library. Libraries, mwah, amazing. And there are a lot of homeless people that hang out in this library. She introduces him to a Slavic poet who's known colloquially as the Bottle Man, who is a very famous poet in his country and is also in America, homeless, has just kind of fallen through the cracks. And Benny discovers that he also hears voices. And he says to her, like, "Oh my God, you hear voices?" And she's like, "Yeah, of course, that's where the poetry comes from." And he challenges Benny to decide. He gets to decide for himself what is real and what makes him crazy. And it's this beautiful exploration of the distress and suffering that people who have various mental health diagnoses is caused not entirely by the fact that they have something quote unquote wrong with them. Ozeki's approach is that when you're treating any kind of quote unquote mental illness, the circumstances of a person need to be treated as much as whatever is supposed to be wrong with them, whatever disorder they may or may not have. I really, you can probably tell I'm very uncomfortable with labelling these things as like diseases or disorders or what have you, because oftentimes it's just a case of a brain being different, and the suffering caused by that is not just because of what the brain is doing, it's also because we live in a society that penalises wonky brains. You know, we hear about somebody who hears voices and we think schizophrenic, we think crazy, we think, you know, they're a danger to themselves and others, they need to be medicated and put away. We hear somebody who is autistic or ADHD and the prevailing narrative is that we should be looking for a cure for those things. And what this book does so beautifully is that it acknowledges that having a brain that perceives reality differently, there's magic in that. There's suffering and there's struggle, of course, but there's also magic in it and beauty. And as somebody who has a bouquet of mental health diagnoses, disorders, conditions, what have you, that really spoke to me because, I mean, I hate the portrayal of autistic people in popular culture generally. There are some improvements, you know, over time. But most of the time, it's like autism is this tragedy and these poor mothers have to deal with these autistic kids and they're not like normal kids and all they want is for their kid to be normal. And if somebody gave me the option to give up my autism and to be normal, for all of the difficulty, for all of the suffering and the pain and the difficulty that I have on a day-to-day basis, I wouldn't give it up for the world. I wouldn't give it up for the world. I think that part of me is the most magical part. Like the way that my brain puts things together, it's what makes me an artist. It's what makes me an independent thinker. It's what makes me immune to fascism, as Naomi Klein puts it. It helps me to see things differently from other people. It helps me to be more empathetic, more compassionate. Everything that I like and value about myself comes from autism. And I think it's always interesting, especially when we look at like high functioning, low functioning labels, which are just such bollocks. All of the sort of diagnostic criteria around autism in particular is about how much does your autism impact on the world around you. It's never about how much are you suffering. Like, what do you need? What do you need in order to be functional? In order to feel safe, to be happy, to live a well-rounded life where you can thrive. And I think I've been incredibly fortunate in that I through, you know, more accident than design, have fallen into a set of circumstances where that is a reality for me. I can have most of the time a life which is set up in that way where I can thrive. For many, many, many years, I did not have that. I did not have that at all. And it was brutal. It was really, really brutal. And I know that my behaviour and my distress was all viewed through the lens of how it was disturbing to other people, how it impacted other people. Anyway, this book really, it turned me inside out. I think it's one of the best books I've read for a really long time. It's a beautifully compassionate book about people who have wonky brains without ever minimizing or dismissing the struggles of that, but also acknowledging the beauty and the magic and the joy, the magic of having a brain that sees a table and hears poetry. Who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want that? It's, yeah, magnificent. So of this stack, the Ruth Ozeki is a must read. Must read. And also The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, must read. Amazing. Really, really good. And then The Lion Women of Tehran and Her Body and Other Parties, also solid, great books. Recommend them as well. Everything else, I mean, if you like a trashy murder as much as me, these ones are great. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up. I've been talking for nearly an hour, so I think that's probably quite enough. If you've watched this far, thank you so much. And why don't you tell me if you've read any of these books yourself in the comments and give me recommendations. I am always hungry for recommendations. I read really quickly, which I know people fucking hate on the internet. I'm sorry, I just do. It's a blessing and a curse. I can never have enough books. So please give me your recommendations, anything you think I like. Some of the books that I've read from your recommendations have been amazing. So thank you very much. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. It really, really helps the channel. I'm trying to grow on YouTube this year, and your subscription means the world to me. It also means that you won't ever miss out when I upload, which I'm doing more and more often these days. If you're not already subscribed to my excellent newsletter, please do come over and sign up for that as well. I'll put the link in the description. It's really great. It's been described as a safe space to be exactly who you are, which is the highest praise I could possibly have from that. So come and do that as well. Thank you so much for watching. Happy reading, and I'll see you in the next video. Mwah. Bye.